Hey guys, Dwayne Estes, Executive Director of the Southeastern Grasslands Initiative, coming to you from the Cumberland Plateau. And the guys and I have been out here working to document these herbaceous open wetland communities. And what you might think, and we need to kind of point out here, is all behind me is really, really dense forest. In fact, if I point this way, I want you to look at just how dense that is. Now think about the average American. Does anybody want to walk through that? No, absolutely not. Think about wildlife. Are you going to have a lot of wildlife in there? Sure, you might have deer bedding down in there, but ultimately, hunters don't want to go through that stuff either. Well, in the same way that people don't want to walk through it and hunters don't want to hunt in it, what do you think the biodiversity wants? Well, if we look here at this site, which has actually been opened up, this used to be forested, and we know that because we can look around. And our friends with the Tennessee Division of Natural Areas and some of their colleagues came in here and they removed, because there was a really rare orchid in here that developing evidence suggests needs more light in order to be able to proliferate and set seed. So they came in and selectively removed some of the trees. And so here's a tree about 8 inches in diameter that was cut out, for example. And so this area is probably about 15 meters by 15 meters square that was opened up, and it has a completely open canopy now. Most of the plants you find in here are obligate open land species. Things like this white-topped aster, for example. You know, this doesn't grow in thick forest, and if it does, it certainly doesn't flower abundantly. It doesn't draw pollinators to it. There's a lot of shrubs out here. There's certain types of blueberries and other members, like we've got what's called a possum haw, Viburnum nudum. These shrubs, when they grow in really thick areas, like in those thickets there, they also don't flower, which is again critical for pollinators, but they also don't set fruit vigorously, which is really important for a variety of birds and mammals. But when they're out in this situation, they tend to flower prolifically because there's pollinators that are abundant, and they fruit prolifically, which provides a food source for wildlife. So getting back to the question of what to do with the surrounding thicket. You know, we with the SGI maintain that right now there's the potential to restore tens of thousands of acres of grassland communities in the Southeast. We're not talking about going in necessarily to soybean fields and replanting that tallgrass prairie. But what we are talking about is going into landscapes where the historical data suggests it should have been open oak savanna or pine savanna that now is totally choked out in a manner that no one likes. And the biodiversity suggests that these should be very, very open. So what does that entail? This site has probably been clear cut in the past, but before it was clear cut, it was a dense standing forest. You know, it would have been really nice if we could have got to the site before it was clear cut, select a few standing oaks or shortleaf pine, you know, post oak or blackjack oak, here and there a white oak or maybe a black oak, and here and there any big shortleaf pines, keep those. Everything else, red maples, some of the black gums, black cherry, really you have to take those out mechanically and just get rid of them because they're in the way. No matter how much you burn that, without thinning those trees first, you're never going to push it back into a savanna state. So if we had opened this up, and imagine now behind me, instead of this wall of thicket, imagine it being much more open. So the question is, how do we know that that forest wants to be more open? Well, the trails that we took in here and where we parked on the side of the road, which is dry, whereas here we're in a wetland, all the roadsides are lined with things like blazing stars, various types of asters, and they only inhabit that strip of road that's between the gravel road edge and the forest edge. When you get into these forests, you might find some of those plants, but they're not flowering. They're only a single leaf and they're in vegetative state. Just like these shrubs out here and this white top aster, they're not getting what they need. They're getting way too much shade and they're not flowering. Therefore, they're not drawing pollinators. They're not setting seed for those birds that eat seed. What we have essentially here is a non-functioning landscape. It's not benefiting the species that need it most. And those species, ladies and gentlemen, are not, in this region, forest species. They are obligate open lands, savanna-dependent species. So the question becomes, this is a perfect case scenario where we can benefit wildlife, we can benefit hunters. Again, hunters don't want to go through that. But imagine if you had a grassy landscape with scattered tree canopy, a beautiful landscape. Aesthetically, it could be pleasing. But you know, we have this big battle in Tennessee to combat this vision that all forests are always good. But the last thing is, this could be a perfect opportunity to not only merge the benefits of wildlife with birds and pollinators, but right here in this wetland is something really, really significant. And it is actually a federally threatened orchid called the white fringeless orchid. And check it out. Right there it is. An absolute beauty, only found in just a handful of places in the whole world. Cumberland Plateau of Tennessee, a little bit down in Georgia and Alabama and Kentucky, and a couple sites in North Carolina in the Blue Ridge Mountains there in Tennessee. So not only can we benefit all those things we talked about, but this species, which really, really needs our help, is also going to benefit. So guys, this is a perfect opportunity for wildlife biologists, botanists, ecologists, hunters, all of us to get on the same page and do what's right. But you know what? We need resources. We need to open these surrounding thickets up and return it to what used to be. And we can do that. Why? Because it's public land. We just have to educate. We have to come up with the resources. Now, the last thing I'll say is that many of these sites are actually surrounded by forest with marketable timber. Big trees that could come out that we can sell, and potentially you could take a few $100,000 and use that to reinvest into on-site conservation or conservation of the region. Doing that though, the last thing I'll say is that's a hurdle that sometimes well-intending groups don't want us to do that, because again, they see this area as being forest. They think about that vision of the squirrel crossing from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River, that all forests are good. This is a clear indication. All of the available evidence is pointing in the absolute other direction. So guys, over and out from the Cumberland Plateau of Tennessee. Thanks to my crew for working with us today on a great project. Y'all think about what we've talked about. And remember, there's a lot that could be done here to bring a lot of groups together on common ground. Follow the scgrasslands.org website. Follow us on Facebook. And let us know if you have any questions or comments. Thank you.